All right, welcome back, everyone. We're going to move on to our next discussion. Our next discussion will be led by members of the ArchivesSpace Development Prioritization Subteam. Team members Angela White and Saran Tran are going to lead this discussion. Saran is an IT technician for the University of Kansas, and ArchivesSpace is one of the applications that he administers and supports for KU libraries. Prior to his current role, he worked at a financial technology company in the San Francisco Bay Area. He has a bachelor's in film and media studies from KU and is usually consuming way too much media content. Angela is Director of Special Collections and Philanthropic Studies Archivist at IUPUI University Library in Indianapolis. She holds a PhD in Eastern European history and takes vegan baking way too seriously. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Angela and Saran.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks to Metadata Standards, who gave a really great presentation. We rely on them pretty heavily, I think, as you will see in a little bit. All right, let me make sure. Does this look right to you?
We can see your screen and it looks like a presentation. So I think that's right. Yeah.
Whee! All right. So Saran and I are lead and vice lead of development prioritization. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we do. We will then walk you through a discussion that we recently had about a ticket. And then we thought that it might be fun to have whoever is in the meeting do a ticket together. So first, you need to understand what we do. Development prioritization is a cross-council team. So we have members of the User Advisory Council and the Technical Advisory Council. And I like to emphasize this every time I talk about DevPri. This is a kind of group where it doesn't matter if you have deep technical expertise. It's great if you have it, but everybody can contribute something. Because what we're doing is looking at JIRA tickets that are submitted by the community to fix bugs and develop new features. And we figure out what we think should happen, what we think is possible, and what kind of priority that has. We meet monthly from September-ish to June-ish, and our meetings are an hour and a half because we have a list of tickets that we need to get through. So when you are submitting JIRA tickets to the system, there are a few things that you can keep in mind that will improve your success. And it depends a little on what kind of ticket you submit. So in the case of bug tickets, a really clear description of what the issue is, when and where it happens. And I will say that Valerie is an excellent submitter of JIRA tickets because she provides lots of screenshots and videos. It makes it really easy to see exactly what's going on and in what circumstances. Also, providing examples of error messages or problematic exports is really helpful, so we don't have to dig too deeply, and it decreases the chance that we misunderstand what you're actually asking for. Bug tickets are usually pretty straightforward. We can either replicate them or we can't. But feature tickets are a very different animal. So the most important thing is a clear explanation of what you want and why you want it. And there was a recent ticket that I thought was really interesting because they were asking for a really big solution to a small stated problem, and there would be a faster fix to that small problem. So I knew I was missing something, and I was right about that the issue was bigger than the stated explanation of why they wanted that particular thing. And it does involve MARC, of course, because a lot of tickets involve MARC. But having a very clear explanation of what you want is important. But the thing that trips a lot of people up, and tickets sort of go into limbo and languish, is there's not enough detail for us to make decisions. Sometimes we send stuff to the Metadata Standards Committee in order to get some specific recommendations about mappings. But one of the things that we come up against very frequently is that not everybody uses ASpace the same way. So maybe what you're doing doesn't work well for people who are using ASpace in a slightly different way. So the more you can take that into consideration when you're submitting your ticket, and the broader the appeal, the more likely that we will be able and willing to pass a ticket on for development. If you want to see the overachiever kind of ticket with mappings and specifications, I would recommend ANW 1209, which was submitted by Corey Neimer, but included a lot of hard work from a lot of different people over a really long time. And we recently passed this one, but it has, I think this specification is like 16 pages. So obviously not everybody is going to be able to do this. Not everybody should be doing this. But the more specific you can be, the more we have to go on. And it makes it easier to decide whether it's something that we think ASpace should do. But now I want to turn it over to Saran, who will talk about selecting tickets, because he does most of that work and I am eternally grateful to him. So Saran, just tell me what you need and I will manage the presentation.
Sure. Actually, if you want to stop sharing, I can share my screen.
Okay, sure.
I just noticed that I was pretty redundant on that part, but yeah, let me start sharing real quick. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we select tickets for the upcoming meeting. Our next one is early April, and typically what we've been doing, but this is something that probably could be more efficient or optimized, but this is kind of what we have been doing. And oops, yeah, so we've been typically, when we first started, there were quite a bit of bugs in the awaiting prioritization category. And so at first we typically looked at the bugs before the features. And we kind of just generalized that because we thought maybe, generally speaking, bugs should be prioritized before features, but yeah, that's up for debate, because there's probably times when there's a feature where it should be worked on sooner better than later. But I believe that when I keep on fidgeting and clicking, I believe that when a ticket gets created, Christine, it gets into this state called newly created, and then Christine takes a first pass through and changes it to awaiting prioritization, or maybe I would assume fast track some, depending on the ticket. So and then typically for both, we've been trying to assign the tickets that people would be familiar with. I know I made mistakes at first when I was first getting to know people's strengths in ArchivesSpace. Like Angela had said, some people don't work in certain aspects of ArchivesSpace, or they're they might not be familiar with the use cases that the tickets are describing. So yeah, so generally, but But then again, sometimes I think it's kind of good to work on something you may be not familiar with, or is a weakness. Hence me trying to help with this presentation. Yeah. And typically, generally speaking, we would try to in terms of how to prioritize, we kind of try to work on the oldest to newest, just so that we can keep the Jira space kind of clean and but yeah. So the list that I usually work off of is this Kanban board. And you can see this column is awaiting for prioritization. And again, like Angela said, sometimes we rely on the other sub-teams. There's a couple that are in the usability sub-teams, visibility tagged, so that they can have some input. But yeah, as you can see, there's about 5 that are in awaiting for prioritization. We've been assigning about 3 tickets each to all of the Dev Prio subcommittee. And we have, I think, 7 people as part of the group. That's excluding Brian, who's the technical lead, and Christine, who everybody knows Christine here probably. Yes, they attend the meeting, the monthly meeting as well. And yeah, so this kind of gives you a picture. We've been actually, as you can see, the list is getting small for awaiting prioritization. This is for bugs. We've been making our way back to the awaiting more information, because sometimes we would be putting the awaiting prioritization into awaiting more information. So hopefully it'd be nice if, if you created a ticket and you see that we could use a little bit more to work off of, basically. Yeah, oops. And yeah, let me go to the features. The features also, well, a little slow. The features also look similar. Again, it's, this Kanban board with, there's 22 waiting for prioritization now. It was way less because, like I said, we had gotten through the list. Maybe Christine had worked through some of the newly created and then put them into awaiting prioritization. But yeah, so we would go through this list and kind of, we would iterate through them like initially and kind of like put them into the meeting notes. Yeah, we have meeting notes here. And yeah, this is what a meeting note would look like, and they would get assigned. And yeah, I would kind of just like assign, like fill out these columns and then reiterate through them, because you don't want, we didn't want to assign things to people who might not be familiar with them. And yeah, so we would kind of shuffle some of them around. And yeah, so which, yeah, I definitely made mistakes where I assigned something a little bit more technical, and I probably should assign that to like someone on the committee, like Randy, or if it was like a repository manager one. I know some people might not have admin rights, so that yeah, so yeah, so that's basically kind of how submitting or selecting tickets have gone. Angela, did you want to take this next one, or do you want me to start on it? Or
well, I can talk through this one, and then I think we're going to have you lead the new one.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen again so you can see the ticket. So This is one that we did recently, and it's ANW 1457. As a user with view-only access, I would like to be able to go directly to the staff version of a PUI page. So I can show you what this looks like. You can see here I'm logged in as admin. If I'm in the public user interface, you can see there at the top of the screen, there's a staff only button. And if you click it, it takes you to the edit mode. But if you become a user that has view only access, and then we refresh the screen, you can see that disappears from our options. So what Dan would like, and Dan, to be fair, is on DevPry, so he knows how to word these things. He would like that button to appear to logged in users with only viewing privileges. Clicking it should bring them to the viewing mode of the staff interface of the PUI page. Existing behavior for logged users with editing privileges should remain the same. So this one it seems pretty straightforward, but not all tickets that seem straightforward are actually. But what I like about this ticket is it presents a use case where the expected behavior doesn't actually happen, and recommends some changes to make that case more like what you would expect given other behavior in the application. Saron, do you remember any of the other comments? I think Althea was wondering if going to the view only as default would be better for some of her use cases. But
there was a comment by Christine who kind of elaborated on the current functionality in that in the ArchivesSpace configuration file, you can set it to either be edit, or you can set it to be read only. But what Dan is asking is kind of an enhancement for the use case where there are users who only have the view only access. So it's slightly different. So the logic would probably have to change a little bit to accommodate what Dan is asking for, which is legitimate. And you know, like you said, we decided to pass it. But yeah, I thought Christine's comment that referenced the previous ticket and the commit that happened was very useful.
Yeah, and sometimes when we get tickets, what seems to be straightforward really isn't. And sometimes that's because you just can't make the code do what you want it to in the way that you want it to. Sometimes it conflicts with previous decisions. And sometimes actually another one of Dan's tickets that we thought would be sort of straightforward really blew up into something big and complex because of the different ways that people use ASpace and how certain fields are used, or used in ways that were not intended originally, but are still important and need to be taken into consideration. So I love that part of the process because you never really know what you're going to get. And we chose to pass this one on for development, but we could do a couple of other things with this depending on the decision that we made. We might recommend it for community development if we think it's something that community developers could handle. We might close it because we decide not to do it. We might close it because it's a duplicate of another ticket, and then we would generally link it to that other ticket and address that one. Sometimes we recommend that people do plugins if they want that set of features, because we don't think there's either enough developer space or there's enough of a use case across the board for that to happen. So with all of those things in mind, our next plan was to do a ticket with folks. So Saron, do you want me to continue sharing a screen, or do you want to share your screen for this one? Because I can keep this up here if you want.
I can share.
All right, I will stop sharing. Yeah, so the plan now is to look at ANW 1462, which is the CAPTCHA feature in resource request form. So this is where we are looking for your feedback. We're happy to take it in the chat, or you could unmute yourself. We normally just have these conversations as a group. We don't usually have 90 folks, but all right, I'm gonna mute myself for the moment and I'll let Saron take over again.
Yeah, so here, I don't know if it was posted in the chat, but yeah, it's ANW 1462. What Sarah Conrad is requesting is a CAPTCHA feature in resource request form. Most of us are probably familiar with what a CAPTCHA is. It's the thing that tries to filter out bots, and you get either pictures of click on the sidewalks, or you have to type in those letters that sometimes look like other letters, but yeah. So yeah, the description says, as a reference archivist, I request that a CAPTCHA feature be added to the form patrons fill out to request collections from the archive. This will prevent any future spam being sent through the form. So yeah, so it's kind of an anti-spam prevention feature that is being requested. So as you can see, Christine, with the useful comment as usual, she says that there is a plugin that is available to instances that are capable of installing plugins, which is actually is usually pretty straightforward with ArchivesSpace, which is pretty nice. So yeah, does anybody want to
We've got some comments about the accessibility of CAPTCHA.
ooh.
And I think we want to address those. I wanted to say something before we get into the weeds there. I like this request and I like the idea of it being incorporated into the core code, because my institution set up this form and it worked fine at first. We did get a few real submissions. We started getting spam, usually one message a day, but then it got out of hand and we were actually getting about 20 to 25 spam messages a day, which wasn't enough to justify keeping it. So we had to disable it. When we went to disable it, the bots had found the port where those requests were submitted. So we had to disable that before the spam stopped coming. So it was basically unusable for us after the first 6 months. So having something like this would be helpful from that perspective, but I am interested. The plugin option is one of those checkboxes that says, I am not a robot. If you click through and see the actual plugin, and I don't know if that makes a difference in terms of accessibility. And I think Lydia and some of the folks who are concerned about that could say whether that is an okay accessibility feature or if that is still problematic. And Valerie linked up to CaptchaCaptcha alternatives and thoughts. See, this is why I love doing DevPri, because this seemed like a straightforward thing to me, but there are lots of things that I wouldn't necessarily think of because they're not my experience or use case.
Yeah, and I like the discussion about whether it should be part of core or not, or keep it as a plugin or and enhance through the plugin, because sometimes if it's just part of core, it'll be installed automatically, and you don't have to install to the step of installing the plugin. But yeah.
Yeah, and I love my IT folks on the IUP UI campus, but they are not experts in archives and they're really overworked. So when I had to have them do config stuff or install plugins, it's a lot and I can't ask too much of them. So that's sort of why I like the core.
That sounds familiar. Yeah. But
read by a screen reader and keyboard accessible.
Yeah, accessibility is definitely something that you should always be taking into account. There are laws regarding accessibility, and yeah, it is a best practice when creating an application or sites. So it's definitely something that should be in the forefront of the thought
Yeah.
process.
So if this were a real ticket, since I'm usually leading these meetings, what I'm trying to find is some sort of consensus, since we try to operate by consensus. I would say, well, maybe we need to send this to user experience folks to get a take on how accessible this is, and whether usability has different recommendations for this kind of thing if we wanted to make it part of the core code. The easy answer is we just say, hey, look, there's a plugin, we close the ticket, you can do whatever you want. But yeah, Valerie, I think that's a legitimate comment. It sounds like something that should be configurable in the core code with more than one option that can be turned on or off. So sites could choose one, whether, and two, which. Yeah, Dan usually votes for the easy answer.
John Reese with a good question. Does DevPri debate ethical considerations for these tech solutions? There are debates in the CAPTCHA space.
If we know about ethical debates, I think that we would talk about them. I sort of know a little bit from what I've seen on Twitter and other places that CAPTCHA isn't always a great option for everybody. So I think it would probably come up given the spectrum of different opinions that we have in DevPri. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely want to do that. Sometimes we have something that's sort of presented as an ethical concern, like if we're trying to do ethical description, but we find that the actual, there's one particular ticket that we looked at where we're using premise to create certain options in a list, and premise didn't allow the option that someone wanted, even though that would have been an ethical decision to make. We would have to find ways around premise to do what they wanted to do. Yeah, some institutions may have their own policy and implementation of a system, and this could conflict if hard-coded.
Yeah, that would go back to kind of what Valerie was suggesting. Maybe it could be it is part of the config so that it wouldn't conflict. But yeah, it's definitely something to take into consideration, Sri.
Yeah, well, I also wonder if there is another option that doesn't involve adding CAPTCHA that has better protections against spam. Because yeah, I mean, we found this pretty unusable. Dan, you have your hand up. Please talk if you.
Hey, yeah, thanks. I just want to mention that one of these things is that this sort of brings to one of the really big issues with DevPry is trying to balance what's good for individual workflows and what's good for the overall development, because we all have different workflows and we want to make it sort of work for everybody. But a big question is often like, how specific to a single workflow is this? Or could this conflict with existing workflows? And that's what's sunk a number of really interesting, it sort of goes back to a little bit with what Angela was saying about the some of the tickets that with not trying to screw up existing data or stuff, no matter whether that was the original intention is people put that work in, and just being careful not to do that. So something like this becomes a question of, is this like in Angela's examples, like it's a problem for them. And it sounds like that's not like unique problem, but how big is that a problem big enough to commit time to versus having the plugin? So I just thought I think it's a really great example ticket. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and trying to figure out the big picture is super difficult sometimes, but that's why we bring people together from a variety of different sizes and types of institutions and people with different kinds of backgrounds, so we can try to get to these issues before we make a decision and then realize, oh, that was the wrong thing to do. Yeah, so based on our discussion, I would imagine that we'd probably just want to close this one and say, hey, there's a plugin for this if you're having an issue. And chances are, if they have that form enabled, they have somebody who can do some amount of work on the back end. So they're probably skilled enough to add a plugin. But yeah, I see this is why I love DevPry. I learned so much in the course of these discussions, and this is somebody, I don't have a techie background, but I do have lots of experience with ASpace. So I think that the combination of things. Yeah, plugins can be incorporated into the core code. Yeah, I do love that the Excel importer is part of the core code now. It just makes things a lot easier. But there was, I don't imagine there was a ton of controversy about that one. If you didn't like it, you didn't have to use it. Yeah.
Corey Schmidt said, it sounds to me the pervasive issue is reducing spam messages. So maybe we could open a ticket to add an open source spam form filter into ASpace.
Clever. I like it. Yeah, that might be another way to do the same thing without having some of these CAPTCHA issues. For us, we just weren't getting enough submissions to worry about troubleshooting it. And now it's not my problem because the lovely folks at IU Bloomington are now hosting us. Shout out to Adam and Bree, who are both here today.
John Reese had a question. Does DevPry evaluate potential security implication with bug fixes or feature requests? To the extent that, you know, our knowledge is capable, I would say, you know, yeah, that's answer that. I'm not a security expert myself, so, you know, I would just be generalizing if I had input on that sort of thing.
Yeah, Brian is essential, and Christine is also super essential to these meetings. We get some really practical information from them about what is actually possible or what has happened in the past. Christine's historical memory of this stuff, I'm not sure that I would get through a meeting without her, or Brian. They're amazing, both.
Sure. And then Dan added, Corey's suggestion is the kind of thing that often happens at DevPry. A ticket wants X to solve Y, but the group determines that Z is a better solution for Y and passes the ticket as such. Yeah, and
yeah, but all of these really great things that people are bringing up are reasons that we need to have lots of different backgrounds on this subcommittee. You know, the more different kinds of expertise we have, the less likely we are to get something wrong. And sometimes it happens. I know we've had some tickets rejected that we passed because, oops, that's actually not the issue we thought it was. So that's always fun. But yeah, this is an extended plug for your participation in DevPry, I would say.
Sarit has her hand up.
Of course I do. I just wanted to say, Angela or Saran, would you let people know how would they maybe get involved in a discussion over a ticket? Let's say let's say you close or reject a ticket, and they would like to actually maybe converse with the team and say, well, why did you do this? Or is there maybe another solution to the ticket or something, or just to be able to have more of a conversation? Even like, I know you can do it in the comment, but maybe it's not coming across in the comments appropriately or whatever. I'm just, in terms of educating people how to do that. If possible.
I'm not sure. I mean, you could always reach out to the Dev Prio committee, or I would assume Christine, or yeah, the comment section is a good place.
Yeah, well,
I don't know if you're able to reopen, but yeah, I'd assume you should be able to still comment on closed tickets. But yeah, go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, you can definitely comment on closed tickets. It's really just about whether the people who are tagged in there have the bandwidth to follow up. I think it's a good plug for getting involved in TAC or UAC, honestly. If you're really invested in certain kinds of features and you have the ability to get involved, push your agenda.
Oh, yeah.
We're happy to see what people want, and we're always looking for more information. One of the big issues that we've been trying to figure out is what digital objects should be, how people are actually using them, and what we want them to do. And so a lot of tickets that get submitted are just a much bigger issue than that particular thing that they're reporting or requesting. So yeah, honestly, the more people who get involved the better off we are. So that's not an easy answer. Sometimes you can find someone in particular to team up with to work on a particular thing, but
Valerie had a interesting question comment. Do you ever invite ticket submitters to discussion about their tickets? Would you consider it appropriate to do so? I think that's actually a great idea. I think typically we've just been kind of using the Jira platform to try to engage the reporter or the commenters about the ticket, but I think that'd be an interesting idea to you know, add them maybe to the monthly meeting so that they could be there in person to discuss their ticket or the ticket that they're interested in. But I'm not sure, yeah, how.
I think it would be super helpful with big ones like 1209 with that huge specification, just to have somebody else walk you through it. Yeah, and some of them, I could imagine maybe having a call for people who are interested in tickets related to digital objects, for example, and get together and discuss some of those things. I'm not really sure how many people would volunteer for that kind of work, but maybe.
Angela, I hosted a group discussion. I put into 2 of the tickets actually about that. I hosted a group discussion, was it last year or the year before? I had actually people from China to UK, and it was all about digital objects and how people were using it. I was going to run more, but life got in the way basically. But I had continued to get people asking to have more discussion on that. So, you know, I'm just saying, I'm on the TAC team, as you know. I'd be happy to help with that and be part of that and to discuss it. I've got tickets myself on digital objects. So I think, hey, Natalie, I think that I would like to go back to doing that and getting that discussion going again, because digital objects, that part of it is so important, I think, and especially going forward. And I think that's become very apparent in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dan,
Angela, if I can chime in really quickly.
sure.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Sarit led that discussion. There's been a lot of activity on Jira. If you're on Twitter, there's been a lot of discussion about digital objects on Twitter. It's definitely, it seems like the community is ready to have this larger discussion, even though it is going to be a big one. And like you said, Angela, who knows if they have time, people have time for it, but I think there are people out there that are ready to lead in this discussion. So I'm just going to put a little plug. There's no dates, no times, no information, but we are currently working on putting together a large community discussion around digital objects where we'll tackle some of these issues. So keep your eye on the listservs and on the blog. We'll be doing that soon.
That sounds awesome. Dan, you had your hand up.
I was just going to mention, I was going to reference what Jessica said more clearly anyway, but also that stuff like there are certain, with digital objects, the issue is that not that there isn't a desire to make improvements, but that the decision on how the program or the ArchivesSpace is going to handle digital objects going forward is actually a higher level decision than DevPri. It is a sort of like, there's like a couple of very different options for that would require ArchivesSpace as an organization to commit to supporting in a certain way because of the wildly different viewpoints on what it should do. And so that has been a sticking point that really can't be resolved by DevPri and has to be resolved by a broader thing, because DevPri is really more focused on specifics. It can, it's a 7-person plus 2 group. So it can't really make those decisions without a broader community buy-in. So that's what really has stuck the digital objects thing, which I know Christine was hoping to have that conversation in prior years, and then COVID happened and such. So it's really exciting to get that moving forward. But yeah, it's not the only way stuff happens. Like the agents module, the new agents module, for example, was not really a DevPri specific thing. I mean, there were some elements, but for the most part, that was like a big thing that was done separately. So not everything goes through DevPri.
Yeah, I feel like we're the in the weeds kind of group, and the bigger picture stuff. We need to have the bigger picture to be able to make the decisions, but we can't create the bigger picture without other people doing most of the work. Yeah, I think that is really important. I wish that I could snap my fingers and resolve some of these issues so we could move forward on them, but
Eleanor had a comment saying posting for specific dev topics would allow more of my colleagues to provide input. It's hard to find time, but discussions about specific scopes are an easier sell. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Angela, do you want to take the last slide we had?
sure. Basically, it's just a shameless plug. Hey, submit tickets. One thing I didn't mention before, but is really important, but include your version number, especially if you're talking about a bug. Generally speaking, if a bug gets fixed in a version that's newer than what you have, they're not going to go back and fix it, but it's really helpful to know if certain errors get replicated in certain versions. So if you know that it happens in multiple versions, it's important to say that. But please, yeah, this was a great discussion. And I feel like this is sort of a larger scale of what we do in DevPri. So if you like having these kinds of discussions, I would again make a plug. But we are just about out of time. So Saran, did you have any last words?
Not really to add on to what you just said. Like submitting a ticket and describing how to reproduce it is super helpful, as explicit as you can, or like providing like data to reproduce like an import problem or something like that. Yeah, and plugging it again, you know, ArchivesSpace is a pretty cool open source project, and it's so good because, you know, of the community that is involved and that contributes. So if you want, you know, you could join the TAC or the UAC and yeah, join a subcommittee and participate in the product itself.
And sadly, both Saran and I are rolling off of DevPri in July. So we need more people. So it's your time. But thanks so much for participating. This was a great discussion, and it was way more exciting than I thought it was going to be. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks, Saran. That was great. Yeah, I think that you both did a wonderful job highlighting, go create tickets, get involved, volunteer if you want to volunteer to be on TAC or UAC. If you feel like you want to go create a ticket, but you notice the issue you're trying to address is already there, there's already a ticket, please don't think, oh, cool, they'll take care of it. Add a comment, add your own use case, get involved in whatever way that you can. So I think that this was a great session that really highlighted there's so many avenues for you to provide input. And like I mentioned, keep your eye on the listservs and on the blogs for other ways to provide input outside of just commenting on tickets and creating tickets, especially around some of these larger topics like digital objects. So yeah, get involved. What a great session. Thank you so much again to well, everyone on DevPri, but specifically to Saran and Angela for being willing to turn their cameras on and share their screens. We're going to go ahead and take our break before we move into our final discussion session of the day, which is going to be on testing, and will be presented by the testing subteam. So we're going to go ahead and take an 11-minute break this time. It looks like it's 49 minutes after the hour. feel free to stretch your legs or do what you need to do, and then we'll come back at the top of the hour for our final discussion of the forum. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, for our last discussion session of the ArchivesSpace Online Forum. Our next and last discussion will be led by members of the testing team for the ArchivesSpace application. Rachel Searcy and Joshua Shaw are going to be leading this discussion. Rachel is the accessioning archivist at New York University and a member of the cross-council testing team. And Joshua is a web application developer at Dartmouth Library and has been working with ArchivesSpace since 2014.